Hi everyone. This video is a book review about a book that my mother recently gifted to me a couple of weeks ago. And the title of this book is Black Beauty. And it was illustrated and retold by Carol Heyer. The original Black Beauty was written by Anna Sewell. I don't know if it's Sewell, S-E-W-E-L-L, or Sewell. But the original Black Beauty was a novel, and Carol Heyer, the illustrator, decided to use her artistic skills to retell this very classic and beautiful story. So, I wanted to share with you my relationship with this book and also my relationship with horses before I go into detail about the author and the illustrator. So, Black Beauty, I've heard about this book ever since I was a child. It's not something that didn't cross my reading list. Every time I would see it on recommended books, I just never took the time out to read it, honestly. The only Black Beauty book that I owned was one that I had bought myself when I don't know if I was 13, 14, or 15. And it was essentially a book that had photographs of Black people throughout the 21st century and prior to that. So there's supermodels, there were actresses and actors and activists and all of these different things. And I was talking about skin color, colorism, and Black beauty. So that was the only Black beauty book that I had. As far as the novel Black Beauty, I was never interested in reading it. I didn't care to read it. And I really believe it was because of my own personal bias against, I guess, animals in general. Like, I really wasn't into animals like that. The only time, as a child, the only time, like, where I had a slight interest in animals was watching the Kratt Brothers on PBS as a little girl. And that was about it. But as far as horses, I didn't care too much for horses, and I'll tell you the reason why. So, the first reason as a child that I didn't care too much for horses was because all of the girls in my class or in my grade would be drawing horses. I liked doing art. People would always ask me to draw things for them in my class. So they're always like, Kiara, draw a horse. Can you draw a horse for me? I just got annoyed. I just didn't care. I thought it was boring. I would have rather drawn a unicorn or a horse with wings like a Pegasus, but I just didn't care. Another thing why I didn't care too much for horses was because at the time I didn't see myself or associate people of color with horses. A lot of the girls in my class or my grade or at my school, they either had a horse or they were involved with activities that involved horses, like they would be in horse competitions and all of these different things. So they had their own little relationship with horses. The only time I did see Black people or people of color with horses or with any type of farm animal was when my mother would take me to the Bill Pickett Rodeo. And that was really the only time. I didn't see it in school books. I didn't see it anywhere. Now, when I got a little bit older in my teen years, I started learning about the Black cattlemen and all of these different names that, of course, my history book didn't teach me about. But I just didn't. I just didn't have a relationship like that. So that's why I never. I wasn't obsessed with them. I would ride a horse. I'd go, like, if there's a pony ride somewhere, okay, I'll ride a pony. But I did not have this deep interest in horses, and that's why I never read Black Beauty throughout the years. Even as an adult, I just would see the name and I would just skip over it because I was like, oh well, whatever. But now that I've learned more about animals on my own, all of the different cool things that animals have, their behaviors, their development, and various things, I've actually started developing an interest in horses and other animals as well. I've been watching videos about like how to take care of a horse, learning about all their different personalities, and truly seeing the beauty in these animals. So that is why I decided now was the time for me to read Black Beauty, because now I'm not as myopic as I was as a child. And now I know that there were people of color throughout history that did work with farm animals and horses and all of these various things. So I felt more of a connection now than I did as a child. So before I get into my book review, I wanted to share with you a little bit about the author, Anna Sewell or Sewell. I don't know how to pronounce her name. It's like Sewell. So, according to Wikipedia, she was born March 30th, 1820 and died April 25th, 1878. She is an English novelist. She is known as the author of the 1877 novel Black Beauty, her only published work, which is considered one of the top best-selling novels for children, although the author intended the work for an adult audience. I think that's kind of funny. Like, you'll start off with one idea and think it'll hit one group, and it'll be a completely different group that it affects. Sewell died only 5 months after Black Beauty's publication, having lived long enough to see her only novel become a success. So apparently, she grew up in a Quaker household. Her father was Isaac Philip Sewell, and her mother, Mary Wright Sewell, was a successful author of children's books. She had one sibling, a younger brother named Philip. The children were largely educated at home by their mother due to a lack of money for schooling. In 1822, Isaac's business shop failed and the family moved to Dalston, London. Life was difficult for the family, and Isaac and Mary frequently sent Philip and Anna to stay with their grandparents in Buxton, Norfolk. In 1832, when she was 12, the family moved to Stoke Newington, and Sewell attended school for the first time. At 14, she slipped and severely injured her ankles. For the rest of her life, she could not stand without a crutch or walk for any length of time. For greater mobility, she frequently used horse-drawn carriages, which contributed to her love of horses and concern for the humane treatment of animals. Okay. Then it says her father took a job in Brighton in the hope that the climate there would help cure her. I'm always reading something like this, like in the past, where they'll be like, go to the sea, go to the mountains, the fresh air will cure them. And so I guess he was thinking the same thought pattern. At about the same time, both Sewell and her mother left the Society of Friends to join the Church of England. Her mother expressed her religious faith most noticeably by authoring a series of evangelical children's books, which Sewell helped to edit. Okay. Sewell assisted her mother to establish a working men's club and worked with her on temperance and abolitionist campaigns. All right. 1845, her health began to deteriorate. She traveled to Europe the following year to seek treatment. Then when she came back, they relocated. In 1866, Philip's wife died, leaving him with 7 young children to care for. In the following year, the Sewells moved to Old Catton, a village outside of Norwich in Norfolk, to support him. So let's talk about Black Beauty. She wrote the manuscript of Black Beauty in the period between 1871 and 1877. During this time, her health was declining. She was often so weak that she was confined to her bed. Writing was a challenge. She dictated the text to her mother, and from 1876 began to write on slips of paper, which her mother then transcribed. That kind of sounds like a Chaucer. Was it Chaucer? When he was doing Paradise Lost and he was blind. So his daughters had to translate it transcribe it for him. This book is considered to be one of the first English novels to be written from the perspective of a non-human animal, in this case a horse. Although it is now considered a children's classic, Sewell originally wrote it for those who worked with horses. She said, "A special aim was to induce kindness, sympathy, and an understanding treatment of horses. In many respects, the books can be read as a guide to horse husbandry, stable management, and humane training practices for colts. It is considered to have had an effect on reducing cruelty to horses. For example, the use of bearing reins, which are particularly painful for a horse, was one of the practices highlighted in the novel. In the years after the book's publication, they eventually fell out of favor." She received a single payment of £40, which translates to £3,456 or $4,600 US dollars in 2017. So, she died after the publication at age 58, possibly of hepatitis or tuberculosis. So that is the story of Sewell. It actually kind of reminds me of that biblical story of the donkey that kept getting beaten and the angel gave the donkey a voice. So it could ask its owner why it was beating him. Like, why are you beating me? Haven't I been a good donkey? So I think that one is pretty interesting. So now let us read about Carol Heyer. Now, Carol Heyer, I had actually seen her work before, but it wasn't on a children's book. It was actually on one of Doreen Virtue's angel cards when she was still doing cards. She has a website. She has a nice sized body of work. I don't know why it won't let me get to her website, but okay. CarolHeyer.com. About the illustrator. It says, "I'm currently a full-time illustrator and writer. Before beginning my freelance career, I worked for a movie production company as a production designer and writer of feature films, including Thunder Run, released by Cannon Films, and Mayday, a direct-to-video release. I've illustrated 28 children's picture books, among them Humphrey's First Christmas and Once Upon a Cool Motorcycle Dude, winner of 8 state rewards. My art has appeared on everything from book covers to bookmarks, and I've done work for Disney, Reader's Digest, Wizards of the Coast, Ray Bradbury, Scholastic, Penguin, Putnam, Henry Winkler, Doreen Virtue, and many others. My artwork is included in the collections of the Graysinger Middle-earth Museum in Jennens, Switzerland, the Mazza Museum, the largest museum of original artwork by children's book illustrators in the world, and all of my TSR Inc. art was purchased by a museum still in development. I have art in the Frank Collection and shows in Chimers Gallery, Storyopolis, Every Picture Tells a Story, Conejo Valley Art Museum, UCLA, and John's Gallery, among others. I graduated from California Lutheran University with departmental honors. My biography has been included in the Who's Who, Who's in the World, contemporary authors. On a personal note, I have 2 rescue dogs named Cashew, Nut, and Peanut. So my friends have officially dubbed my home the Nut House, which of course includes me. I've been told that I'm one of the 3 mixed nuts. I feel right at home with both. I love interior decorating and collecting Asian and African furniture and sculptures. My father, William J. Heyer, and my mother, Merlin M. Heyer, were great influences in my life. I owe the success of my freelance career to the support my parents gave me. And it just has a list of all of her work. It's absolutely amazing. It has a list of her art, her books. She even has a blog. I guess the Mixed Nut Dog. Her last post in her blog was October 9th, 2023, and she was talking about Blue Jays. Yeah, so she's a pretty cool lady, and you should check out her website and her art. So, let us get into this book, Black Beauty. So it starts off with this little tiny baby. Look at the little baby coat with his mother. The first place I remember was a large, pleasant meadow with a pond of clear water. In the daytime, I ran by my mother's side, and at night I slept close to her. When it was hot, we used to stand in the shade of the apple trees, and when it was cold, we had a nice, warm shed near the plantation. There were 6 colts in the meadow beside me. Sometimes our play was rough, because others would bite and kick, as well as gallop. One day, when there had been a lot of kicking, my mother whinnied for me to come to her. She said, "These colts are very good colts, but they have not learned their manners. I hope you will grow up gentle and good and never learn bad ways. Do your work and never bite or kick, even in play." I have never forgotten my mother's advice. I love how they humanize. I love how they humanize or personify Black Beauty. Oh, by the way, this book was made in the year 2000, so it's 23 years old. But I love this. Like, you see the little baby. As time passed, I began to grow handsome. My coat grew fine and soft and was bright black. I had 1 white foot and a white star on my forehead. When I was 4 years old, Squire Gordon decided that it was time for my breaking in. Breaking in means to teach a horse to wear a saddle and bridle and bit to carry a person on his back. The horse also has to learn to pull a cart behind him. A bit is a piece of steel as thick as a man's finger, which is pushed into the horse's mouth and held there by straps. It feels very bad, but with my master's gentle ways, I learned to wear my bit as well as my bridle and saddle. I just couldn't. I don't know why we do certain things to animals. Like, I just don't understand. Even though I'm not like a vegetarian or a vegan, I still eat animals, but still, like, sometimes we as humans just go over the top for no reason to domesticate animals instead of just letting them be free. Did the horse ask to have something in its mouth? How would you feel to have something in your mouth and have somebody put a heavy load on your back and make you just race at a full pace? But okay. Next came the iron shoes. The blacksmith took my feet in his hands and cut away some of my hoof. It didn't hurt, so I stood while he took a piece of iron in the shape of my foot, clapped it on, and hammered it with nails. My feet felt very stiff and heavy. but I soon got used to it. That just sounds like torture. How would you feel if somebody was nailing something on the bottom of your foot? I mean, they're like, oh, they don't feel pain. I don't care. It's uncomfortable. If I needed a, a blacksmith or an iron cast on my foot, I would have been born with it. I would have been born with it. This is a beautiful picture. Well, at least the animal is beautiful. I don't know about this dude. I guess it's one of the better owners that Black Beauty had, but my master drove me in a double harness with my mother because she was steady and could teach me. She told me the better I behave, the better I would be treated. But, she said, there are many kinds of people. There are good owners like our master, but there are bad, cruel owners as well. I hope you will have a nice owner, but a horse never knows who might buy him. I started like really getting into this book by the second page because it just reminded me so much of enslavement. Honestly, because that whole line, it made me have flashbacks of narratives or first account narratives of enslaved people of African descent. Like, it just reminded me of that because they would say things just like that. Oh yeah, I was sold to such and such and they were okay, but then I was sold to so and so. Why are you even being sold at all? I love this picture because it's very colorful and it has a little lamb in there. I love lambs. Hi, little lamb. Hi, little lamb. How are you? So Black Beauty is taken to a stable and there's this gray pony. It's a little gray pony. And Black Beauty asks, what is your name? And he turns around and says, my name is Mary Legs. Are you going to live here? So this is Mary Legs. He a little pony. Just then, a tall chestnut mare with a long neck looked over from the next stall. The ears were laid back, and the eye looked mean. So you are the horse who gets my stall, she said. It isn't very nice for a colt like you to put a lady out of her home. I beg your pardon, I said. The man put me here, and I had nothing to do with it. Well, she said, we shall see. It's funny because like none of y'all have any rights, but you're arguing over space. Like you, literally all of you are in the same position and you don't have any choice. Like you're not running free. None of you are running free, but you're arguing over where you're going to be essentially trapped for the rest of your life. Poor little horses. In the afternoon, when she went out, Merrylegs said, Ginger has a bad habit of biting and snapping. I told him that I never bit anything but my food, and I couldn't imagine why Ginger would do that. It's just a bad habit, said Merrylegs. She says no one was ever kind to her. She was treated very badly before she came here. John, our coachman, does all he can to make her happy, but she still doesn't seem to trust anyone. This kind of reminds me of that story of the elephant. I don't know if it's a true story or if it's a fictional story. But there was an elephant that had chains on its legs and its ankles so that it wouldn't run off. And when they took off the chains, it had the ability to leave, but it was so used to the chains being there that it didn't even notice that the chains were gone because the chains were now in its mind. It had been officially broken and domesticated. I almost think domesticated and broken are synonyms for one another, because you're forcing something out of its nature. You're forcing an animal to behave in a way that it usually doesn't act, if that makes any sense. I think that's why I'm on kind of sideways about getting a pet. I really don't want a pet like that, because I feel like me personally, I just feel bad because I'm like, you should be outside doing whatever you want. You're free. But of course, some animals have been domesticated where if they were in the outside world, they would just die. They aren't strong enough to fend for themselves. So we've created them like this, like very frail, fragile animals. So they need us. They need us to take care of them. They expect a human to take care of them. Even animals out, like squirrels, they'll be like, oh, you're going to feed me. Oh, I'm just going to come eat your food out of your trash can. Then it says, the next day when we came home, the lady of the house was at the hall door. Well, my dear Mrs. Gordon, how do you like him? I've never ridden such a nice creature, he replied. He's as fast as a deer. What should we call him? He is quite a beauty, she said, and he has such a sweet face. What do you think about calling him Black Beauty? Black Beauty. Why, yes, I think that's a good name. I'm loving this lady's outfit. I like it. It's very pretty. It's blue. Of course, she has the style of her time, which I never really liked this hairstyle. But the outfit I will wear. I'll wear the outfit. Just don't care for the ringlets. Okay. So, he goes and he starts talking to Ginger. You know, the horse that had a problem and was acting up. And she asked him how was he raised. And he told her. And she's like, well, if I was brought up like you, I might have a good temper too. But now I don't think I ever will. And he said, why not? She said, because it's different with me. No one was ever kind to me. When it came time for my breaking in, men cornered me in a field, one holding my forelock and one holding my nose, so tight I could hardly breathe. And they forced the halter and bar into my mouth. After that, I was sold to a man in London. I had been driven with a bearing rein before, but in this place we were reined much tighter, because the master thought it would make us look more stylish. One day when they were trying to hold my head up with the rein, I began to kick with all my might, so they decided to sell me. I was sold to a man in the country. He was a good master, but his groom was very mean. If I didn't move quickly enough, he would hit me. One day, I bit him, so I was sold again. That's when I came here. I was sorry for Ginger, and as the weeks went on, she became much more gentle and cheerful around me. This picture is gorgeous. Like, look at the detail on this apple. God, she's an amazing illustrator. Absolutely amazing. But yeah, like this chapter or this section of the book actually reminds me of people that I've met. People that were so mean. And as I got older, I stopped being upset if they were going off on people or acting a certain way, because I knew something had happened in their life that made them act like this. Something had hurt them. Something had gone wrong. That's why I don't really get mad anymore like that, because I just see somebody that's hurting on the inside, even if they're screaming. I remember I had an old coworker years ago. This was like 10 years. I was in my early 20s. And this lady was so mean and so rough, because I worked with children. So she would serve the children food and all these different things. And she's just very rough and but she had a little boy. And she just was so gentle with that boy. She gave him whatever he wanted. People called him spoiled and all of that. Her face would light up when she saw her son. So come to find out, this little boy was like a surprise. I wouldn't say like a surprise child, like she's surprised. She had actually had a different child before this boy, and that child had been murdered. So it changed the whole dynamic of how I saw her, because some people don't recover from things like that. It's hard when your child is taken away in such a manner. Yes, I could see why you're bitter with the world now and why you don't trust anybody. I can see that. Some people have been beaten. Some people have been robbed, or they've had to struggle since the day they were born. There are literally people I've met in my life that have been abused since they were an infant. So I can understand how they develop into these types of people. And sometimes you just got to have compassion over people and not take it personally, because it affected their development. One day, John and my master had gone to town. The master was busy all day, so we did not start for home until late afternoon. It was raining and the wind was blowing quite hard. I heard the master say to John that he had never been out in such a bad storm. By the time we got to the toll bridge, it was nearly dark. The moment my feet touched the bridge, I knew something was wrong, and I came to a dead stop. "Go on, Beauty," said my master, but he gave me a touch with the whip, but I didn't move. "There's something wrong, sir," said John, as he jumped out of the cart. "Come on, Beauty, what's the matter?" Of course I couldn't tell him, but I knew that bridge was not safe. Just then a man on the other side began shouting, "Stop! The bridge is broken, and a part of it is missing. If you keep coming, you'll fall into the river." For a while, nobody spoke. And then my master said in a serious voice, "God gave men reason so they can figure things out for themselves, but he gave animals a different kind of knowledge, which they often use to save the lives of men." That is so true. You'll hear stories of people's animals like leaving their house. They're like, "Oh, my owner has had a stroke. They're unconscious on the floor." Or protecting a child from an abuser and all of these different things. I remember I read it was a video account a couple of years ago. This little dog sacrificed its own life to save its owner from either being run over by a tractor or something. Like, it saved its owner's life by sacrificing itself. Some animals are so compassionate, more compassionate than we are to ourselves. I recently saw a video maybe 2-3 weeks ago. There was a young lady out in the ocean and she could have drowned. But the only reason she was alive, she had been out there overnight. She was basically trapped. She was being floated up by dolphins. The dolphins saved her life. I'll have to give you that article if I can find it. The dolphins kept her afloat enough and so that they could that she could be saved by other human beings, and eventually they did save her. So animals are like that. So let us see what happens. So apparently the mistress got sick and Okay. Our mistress got very sick, and the doctor told her that she had to go to a warm country before she would get well. Everyone was sad as the master began getting ready to leave. He sold Ginger and me to an old friend of his and gave Merrylegs to the vicar. When the last sad day came, Ginger and I brought the carriage up to the door for the last time. The master came down the steps carrying our mistress in his arms. He put her in the carriage while all the servants stood around crying. "Goodbye," he said as they started down the drive. "We will never forget any of you." The next morning, John took Ginger and me across the country to Earlshall Park, where our new master lived. We went into the yard through a stone gateway, and John asked for Mr. York. "Now," said Mr. York, "I see nothing wrong with these horses, but is there anything about them I should know?" "Well," said John, "we have never used the bearing rein with either of them. The black horse has never had one on, and it was the gagbit that ruined the other one's temper." "Here," said York, "they have to wear it. If my lady's carriage horses are not reined up tight, she wouldn't be happy." "I'm sorry about that," said John, "but I have to go or I'll miss my train." He spoke to each of us for the last time, and then he was gone. I have never seen him since. You're just getting passed around. Ugh, this is so sad. So they're with these new people, these new owners, and hold on. What happens? This story is way too long for me. Okay. Day after day, our bearing reins were shortened, and instead of looking forward to having my harness put on, I began to dread it. Ginger seemed upset too, but she didn't say very much. One day my lady came down the steps later than usual. "Are you ever going to get those horses' heads up, York? Raise them once." York came to me first, pulled my head back, and fixed the reins so tight I could barely stand it. Then he went to Ginger. She reared up and hit York hard in the nose. Ginger went on rearing and kicking until she fell down, hitting me hard. York sat down on her to keep her from struggling. He yelled, "Unbuckle the black horse." The groom set me free and led me to the stall. Before long, Ginger was led in by 2 grooms. She was never allowed to pull the carriage again. I had a new partner named Max who was used to the tight rein. Early in the spring, my master and his family went to London, and Reuben Smith, the head groom, was left in charge. Okay. So it just seems like beauty is just being passed over, passed around, just from one owner to another, because I'm not trying to make this video very long. It's just very, very sad. In a brief synopsis, he just keeps meeting all of these different people. Some of them are nice, some of them are abusing him. But in the end, there is a happy ending. And I won't give away the happy ending because there's just too many details in this short children's book, which I didn't even realize it was this long, because all I saw was a short one, and she essentially made a shorter version of the novel. But how we treat animals, how we treat humans, just a reflection of ourselves. There's some people that want to treat humans better than animals. There's some people that want to treat animals better than humans. But I feel we should treat every living thing with some type of respect, especially if we're using them for sustenance or something, if we're fishing or if we're hunting, have some type of respect. Even when you're picking a plant, in some traditions, like let's say Ayurvedic traditions, you give thanks for the plant. You say, hey, I'm using you for this. You have an intention for the plant. You're not just out there treating it like it's useless, because every living thing has a piece of God within it. So I think Black Beauty is a wonderful way to introduce compassion, not just for like all living things, but especially for animals, for horses. I'm actually glad the lady wrote this book. I think that she made an impact that I don't know if she realized how big her impact would be, but I'm pretty sure this was one of the books that changed people's lives. Just like that novel about I don't know who wrote it, John Sinclair, where it changed the way that meat and factories were handled. Something like that. Shock value. It's easy to hear something from a third-person account, but a first-person account is very powerful, and it opens up your mind to all of the possibilities or all of the things that we overlook or didn't consider. Many of us live we're just focused on our own lives or focused on our own problems. We don't really see anybody else because all we're thinking about is ourselves, which is natural, self-preservation. But at a certain point, have to realize we all share this world. If one of us suffers, all of us suffer, and that's just a fact. Like, if one of us is starving, it's going to have a ripple effect. It's going to affect everyone. All of us are interconnected, whether we like to think about it or not. So I really liked this book. I want to read more books illustrated by Carol Heyer. Very talented lady, and I think she did an excellent retelling of this. If you are one that is looking for books about animals to teach your children or yourself or anybody in your life about the elements of compassion and how life experiences can shape the human or the animal, I would recommend this book, as well as a novel too. So talk to you later, everyone. Bye-bye.